Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Felix Vargas. I'm a member of the Latino Coalition of the Tri-Cities, and I want to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us here this evening for this event, for this Candidates Forum. It's a bit early yet for a lot of people, and folks are getting off work, so we anticipate more folks will be joining us as we go into the evening. Let me just say that we are very proud to be co-hosting this event with the League of Women Voters. The purpose of a candidates forum such as this is twofold. First, we want to inform the community on issues at hand in which many community members have an interest. Secondly, we want to allow our candidates an opportunity to outline their positions and, of course, to bid for your vote, our vote. Now, the Latino Coalition and the League of Women Voters are nonpartisan stakeholders in this event. We want to make that very clear. We want to especially thank the City of Pasco and the Pasco Police Department and the Police Chief Bob Metzger for allowing us use of this great facility for the forum tonight. And with that, I want to now introduce the moderator for the forum this evening. Moderating this evening will be Mr. Mike Gonzalez. Now, Mike serves as the evening news anchor and assistant news director at KAPP, KView, the ABC affiliate in Central Washington. He was most recently the morning anchor at the NBC affiliate in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mike is an achiever. While there, he won an RTNDA award for an investigative piece on dangerous football helmets being worn by high schools across North Carolina. He started his career in Columbia, Missouri as an anchor and reporter at the NBC affiliate. Following that, he worked at the CBS affiliate in Lincoln, Nebraska as an anchor reporter, where he earned an AP award for Best News Series for a documentary. He moved on to Omaha, where he was a morning anchor reporter. And again, while there, he got another AP award for Best Breaking News Coverage. From Omaha, Mike came to Spokane, where he most recently served as the main evening anchor for the ABC affiliate. Some of you may have seen Mike on Dish Network back in 2012 when he hosted a Latin cooking show called En la Cocina, which is Spanish for in the kitchen. So as you can see, he's quite versatile in his work. Mike is married, has 3 children. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce the moderator for tonight's forum, Mr. Mike Gonzalez.
See, I wrote that introduction myself, so I tried to make it as good as I could, but gosh, it just makes me realize I've been in the news business a long time. I like to say I'm a lot older than I look, but I think that's going away. I can't use that joke anymore. But Felix, thanks so much. Good evening. As Felix said, my name is Mike Gonzalez. I'm the news anchor with KView Television here in Kennewick, Channel 42, also a member of the Latino Coalition of the Tri-Cities. On behalf of the coalition, the League of Women Voters, Benton and Franklin Counties, City of Pasco TV, Richland City TV, we welcome you to this forum. We appreciate you guys coming and being involved in this civic process because we know really how important it is. Tonight's forum is being recorded to be replayed on Pasco TV. It's channel 191, Richland City TV. That's channel 192 and shared with charter stations around the area. So if you're not able to attend, obviously you can watch it there or you can re-watch this. They're also going to put this on YouTube as well. I would like to note that the Latino Coalition and the League of Women Voters do not support any of the candidates. In presenting the candidate forum, it's our objective, it's our opportunity for voters to come out, for you guys to be informed, and for us just to really present the issues. So we're taking no sides, we have no agendas here. Tonight we'll be hearing from candidates who are seeking the positions of state representatives from the 16th District, both positions 1 and 2, and state representatives from the 9th District for position 1. And as you can see, the 5 candidates for position 1 in the 16th District are going to go first. We'll be using the following format. Each candidate is going to make a 2-minute opening statement. We will then move to a question and answer period. This will be a 1.5-minute time limit for their responses. All candidates will answer the same questions, alternating who goes first. We prepared the questions, but we're also taking written questions from the audience. So if you've got any good ones and you really are wanting to ask something, please do that. If you do submit a question, we ask that it's not too personal of a nature, or it's just not crazy, or, and you guys use your discretion. You guys are smart out there. So, you only get one question per person. So please be aware of that. And, in the previous candidate forum, we got some questions that were like 3-part, try to keep it as simple as you possibly can, because, they're written as well. So we've got to decipher them. So the easier you make it and the more clear you make it for us, the easier it'll be for them to answer. Certainly. And upon conclusion of the questions and answers, each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. As well, candidates, I want to point out our timer for you. She's going to hold up a sign when you have 15 seconds left to speak. There it is. Then she's going to throw up the stop sign. Now, you don't have to stop. You don't have to give her right away. But, try to close it out as quickly as you possibly can without stopping in the middle of your thoughts. So we want you to obviously complete your thoughts, and don't want to delay you any way in that capacity. So let's begin by introducing the candidates running for state representative from the 16th District, Position 1. They're Alan Pomranning, William Bill Jenkin, Skylar Rude, Rebecca Francic, and Mary Ruth Edwards. And you may give them a round of applause if you'd like. And for consistency, the candidates are seated and will be addressed to begin in the order in which they filed to run for this office. So let's begin with Mr. Pomranning. Your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Michael. Am I on? Thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters. Thank you to the Latino Coalition, and to you, the voters. I appreciate you being here tonight. It's a wonderful opportunity to explore our future. I have a lot of hope for the future of our state. I am happy to share with you how a qualified candidate can move us on a path forward. My name is Alan Pomranning, and I am proud to be the mayor of Walla Walla. I am a retired engineer. I am a certified professional project manager. I'm a certified municipal leader. I am a Rotarian and a husband, a father, and a grandfather. I'm about funding exceptional education without adding a state income tax. I will continue to create jobs in our area, in Eastern Washington, and in our state. I'll work with you to fix our roads, to fix our water systems, and to find ways to do that are economical and straightforward. In 2017, I will co-sponsor levy leveling legislation, that's a mouthful, to create a permanent solution for school funding. I believe strongly, I have kids in school, I believe strongly in exceptional education in our state. I will not support the 1% state income tax that's going to be proposed at the beginning of the session. I will co-sponsor legislation to reevaluate our governor's carbon tax. It's not really a carbon tax. It's a business tax. I am a leader with real plans, with many successful projects behind me, and I will take that same leadership to Olympia for you as your representative. I'll count on your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkin.
Yes, hello, I'm Bill Jenkin, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Latino Coalition for tonight's forum and all of you. First, a little bit about myself. I hold a BA in Business Management. I'm currently the president of the Prosser School Board. I'm a financial advisor, owner of Prosser Vineyard and Winery, and also Bill's Tasting Room, and several commercial properties in downtown Prosser. In addition to my elected position and businesses, I have been very involved in the community. I'm the district governor-elect for Rotary District 5060. I was the founding chairman for the Prosser Boys and Girls Club. I served the Prosser Chamber of Commerce as its president for 2 years. I'm also a board member for People for People. The reason I'm a candidate for this position is that I and others believe that experience matters. I live the issues, facing our communities every day. Our economy has been struggling for almost a decade. And as a small business owner myself, I can say with authority that we need to do more to support our job creators in our communities. We need to reduce the B&O taxes, which strangles the working capital of our small businesses, greatly reducing their chances of success. Our state needs to address our educational challenges without raising taxes. We need to work towards local control of our schools. We need to restore parental and student choice. Not all students want or need to go to a liberal arts college. Many students would thrive in the trades. Finally, we need to encourage our parents to take a much greater responsibility in their children's education. We should do more to support our local farmers. It's essential that we secure and strengthen our farmers' rights now and into the future. I'm married with 3 children and 2 grandsons. For my family and for yours, I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Jenkins, thank you. Mr. Rude.
Thank you to our sponsors for the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank you all of you for taking the time out of your schedules to be here. My name is Skylar. I was born and raised in Walla Walla. I'm 30 years old. I've lived there for about 27 years of that. I attended Walla Walla Community College for 2 years, and then got into the workforce in the insurance industry as an insurance agent. I most recently was Representative Walsh's legislative assistant. I worked in the legislature for the 2015 and 2016 sessions in that capacity, which was a very valuable learning experience. It's a fun, complex system that I enjoy working in tremendously. I've also been involved in the Republican Party locally in Walla Walla for over 10 years. I'm currently the state committee man for Walla Walla County, which is a member of the state organization that oversees the state party. I'm also a member of the county party executive board there. As far as legislative priorities, education is going to be the #1 issue facing the legislature this next session. And I believe that it's very important that the legislature focuses on outcomes when addressing education. It's not just a fiscal issue, but we need to make sure that our kids are graduating from high school. Washington State currently has about a 77% graduation rate, which is not acceptable to me. There are other states with a 90% graduation rate. So we need to be focusing on, as was previously mentioned, alternatives, vocational training, apprenticeship programs. I believe that's very important. Something that's very important to Pasco, which we've heard from the Pasco School District for the last 2 sessions, is an early learning center, which will be one of my priorities if elected. So it looks like I'm about out of time. I appreciate the opportunity. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Root. Ms. Francic.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Francic, and I am running for the Washington State House, position #1 in the 16th Legislative District. This is what I have to offer you as a candidate. 19 years of fiscally responsible local government experience, over 17 years of direct working experience in the K-12 education system, and a solid grounding in agriculture, which is the #1 driver of Washington State's economy. Agriculture is the largest economic engine in Washington, and it is extremely important to our local economy. With my degree in agronomy and real field experience, I have a comprehensive understanding of the issues impacting this industry. I understand their water needs, I understand their transportation needs, and I understand their environmental issues. With 2 master's degrees, I currently work as a nationally board-certified teacher for Pasco schools. I know firsthand the issues that are facing educators, students, and taxpayers as we work to provide an education that prepares our students to be fully competitive in filling jobs that are created by Washington industries. Lastly, I have served as a Pasco City Council member for 19 years. I have a long history of collaborating with other public agencies to improve industrial opportunities in Walla Walla, Benton, and Franklin counties. Appointed by 2 governors, I represented our region on the Washington State Public Works Trust Fund Board and the Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board. I have helped in that service to prioritize, fund, build roads, bridges, sewer, and water systems throughout our state. Our region has been the direct beneficiary of those projects, including Port of Pasco's Ainsworth Overpass, US 395 Hillsborough Road Interchange, 2 overpasses on Highway 12 near the Port of Walla Walla, the Walla Walla Myra Dent Road improvements, Prosser Wine Country Road, Benton County Pierrot Road extension, and the 10th Avenue Bridge over Zintel Canyon. These projects have made our roads safer, ensuring that products and workers can move in a safe and efficient manner. If you believe this experience will benefit you, please vote for Rebecca Francic.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Latino Coalition for allowing me to participate tonight. I am Mary Ruth Edwards, a conservative, liberty-minded Republican and candidate for state representative in the 16th District, Position 1. I have a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in education. I serve as the only woman on the Prosser City Council. In addition, I teach first grade in the Prosser School District. Teaching is my second career, and I have been doing it for 11 years. As the state committee woman for the Benton County Republican Party, I am active in politics both locally and at the state committee level. I was a single mom for 20 years and successfully raised 2 grown children, and I am currently a grandma. I am also a Marine Corps veteran. I will be your voice in Olympia, committed to you and the right priorities: jobs, public safety, a first-class education for our children, cheaper health care, and well-maintained roads. Our taxes should not be funding the West Side agenda, but instead used for our highway projects, our agenda. I will work hard to protect our farms and our water rights. I staunchly support the Constitution, gun ownership, and private property rights. My campaign motto is lower taxes, less government, and more freedom. If we don't raise taxes or impose new ones, the people of the 16th District will have more money in their pockets, and our small business owners could afford to hire more people. Less government means keeping the government constrained by the U.S. and state constitutions as was originally intended. The USDA just told the Prosser City Council that we were not diverse enough and suggested potentially costly ways to remedy our lack of diversity. Why is a federal agency trying to influence local politics? It's not the government's job to try to influence politics. Education decisions are best left up to our local school boards. I will work to get Washington State away from the Common Core standards and back to local school board control. I will be a strong voice for business rights. In Seattle, we've already seen the negative effects on businesses and economy of a $15 minimum wage. So it's my goal to work with other like-minded statesmen and women to ensure lower taxes, less government, and more freedom for the people of Washington State and the 16th District. I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for your opening statements. We're going to get to the question portion now. We're going to try to get to 5 questions each. They'll all be the same. And we'll prioritize audience questions. So if you have a question out there from the audience, I'll certainly prioritize that over anyone that I may have. So just make sure that you get to some of our volunteers that are out there. The first one is from the audience, but it's one that I wanted to ask as well, so I'll expound a little bit on sort of my question that I have and then let the audience question carry it. Mental health across the state is fragmented, disjointed, needs a major overhaul. Our jails are filled with the mentally ill who are not receiving vital services, especially in crisis response in my time here in Central Washington. In March, I covered the case of Mark Moreno. He was a young Benton County resident who died inside the Benton County Jail. His family desperately sought mental help for Mark before he was arrested. Ultimately, he died inside the Benton County Jail. Benton County Sheriff, since that time, on multiple occasions, has begged that they get better crisis response and that his jail is becoming a ward for the mentally ill. So how do we avoid senseless deaths like Mark Moreno's from happening? And the audience member has asked, what is your strategy for the challenge concerning the mentally ill in the criminal caseload? Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. I am proud to go first on this one. Although I'm an engineer, it's not my area of expertise. One of my skills is to be able to listen to groups and use the expertise that's happening in our community. In this case, our experts are recommending a couple changes to how we handle these sorts of things. The first is, some of you may be aware of something called the Utah model, where we bring housing to people with addiction and mental illness first, and then we work on the addiction and mental problems. This helps stabilize people. This is not the kind of thing we've been doing. It's just one way to move our issues forward. So there are a lot of things that we can work on this. I will participate in hearings and continue to listen and figure out what we can do as a group. We in Walla Walla are working towards a very large, we have what are called a coalition that is working on these issues, and this is the one of the emerging strategies that we're using. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Okay, yes. Well, I've worked in the community for about 30 years, and with that, I've really realized what the value of partnerships are. And I really think that this is something that is just waiting for partnerships to happen locally, but then statewide as well. And when I am elected, I'll happily co-write any legislation that's going to take away what's happening here, because it's as we all know, they just don't have a chance. If they don't have housing and they don't have any place to go and there's no money that's appropriated for them, something has to be done. So partnerships and community is where I would go.
Thank you. Mr. Rude.
First off, I'd like to just say that this is definitely not a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be. I do believe that mental health issues oftentimes can be tied to other societal issues like homelessness, criminal activity, and we need to make sure that when an individual is arrested and that they're receiving a mental health evaluation in a timely manner. So we don't need to be housing our mentally ill patients or individuals who are experiencing those issues in an incarceration situation. It's just not appropriate. It's not best for the individual. It's not the responsible thing to do as a society. So I do think that being proactive and addressing mental health issues on the front end ultimately will be more efficient than trying to address them in the long run. As a fiscal conservative, I think that's the most fiscally responsible way to address the situation as well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Francic.
Thank you. You know, the state used to be a lot more involved in mental health, and I don't know if it was 25 years ago or so, but they started cutting the number of beds that they had and the funding they had. And local communities at that time begged them not to do that because they said they were ill-equipped to deal with mentally ill patients. They did not have the funding to deal with mentally ill patients, and they predicted that what we would see is mentally ill patients ending up in jails. So what we see today is exactly what we thought was going to happen. This is something that we really do have to consider carefully. We care about the people in our community. Many of us have people in our families that have a mental illness. Not all the people that we have mental illnesses have insurance. It's not going to be intuitive to tell people that we need to up the amount of money spent so that we can cover mental illness, but if you look at the amount of dollars that are being spent in the jail system right now and you have a shift to preventative care, I think you will find that it isn't as expensive as it currently is for us. Also, Pasco has recently been in the headlines. You have heard about the Zambrano shooting. It was a terrible tragedy for his family, but that is an individual that was very ill. He had drug issues and he had mental issues. He did not have the help he needed, and it has cost the Pasco taxpayers quite a number of dollars because we are facing lawsuits, and that is not humane treatment for our society, and it also is not cost-effective for our citizens. Seattle has taken an approach where they are actually housing people that are alcoholic, and they have had some success with that. They found it's cheaper than having people in emergency rooms. So I think there are a lot of models out there we can consider.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
As everybody said, this has been a real problem. And I understand just recently, in fact, I believe this last week, that at the county level, Benton and Franklin commissioners have decided that they are going to privatize, make a contract, can't even talk today, sign a contract with a private organization to assist with crisis response here in Benton and Franklin counties. I believe that we need to look at that from a state level. When we have a mandate from the state Supreme Court that we have to fully fund education, which we need to fully define it first, we still need to, where are we going to come up with the money? I think privatizing or working with partnerships is a very good idea, because this can't go on the way it has been. But I don't believe it's the state's job to fully fund that. I think we need to look and be very creative, allowing faith-based organizations and private organizations to come in and lend us a hand with this.
Thank you very much. That is question one. Question two also comes from the audience. Certainly the 16th Legislative District, it stretches a wide swath. You've got a lot of different type of folks in here. You have urban, rural issues, cultural diversity. So a lot of things that go on in this district. It's a really unique place in central Washington. So the question is this: what is a core issue that unites the 16th Legislative District, and how do you plan to act on that? Mr. Jenkins, you're first.
Well, there's one, and that's transportation between the two. It would be really nice if there can be a 4-lane highway to Walla Walla. And I really think that that's something that that needs to be done, and I will work with that. Also, there's gang problems. Let's face it. We have to work at alleviating the problems that we have in our community. What I found in in Prosser was that we were afraid what was going on in Grandview, and it was coming our way from Sunnyside, Grandview, Yakima. We got a hold of the Boys and Girls Club, and we were able to start a Boys and Girls Club within 2.5 months. We raised $80,000, and now the kids have a safe place to go. And I think it starts with that type of environment, to where they're out. When they're out of school, they're in someplace good for them. So, to me, I think the relationship with gangs and roads and transportation are two of the biggest things.
Thank you. Mr. Rood.
Thanks for the question. I would say that education is probably the most uniting issue. That's something that affects every single person and every single family. Whether you're a grandparent or a child, the public education is going to be an important part of that person's life. So I mentioned this a little bit in my opening, but I'd just like to expound on that. I believe that the education needs to be looked at in maybe a more broad approach. Early learning is something that's very important. We need to make sure that kids are ready to succeed when they enter the K-12 system, and which ultimately studies have shown result in increased success in the K-12 system. So again, an example of being proactive. Also, higher education, taking a broader view of that. I see higher education as more than just a college experience. It's certainly very important for a lot of people, 4 years, 6 years, but there are also other programs that are vocational in nature. And I mentioned apprenticeship programs earlier. My brother, for example, is an electrical apprentice right now. And these are careers that, or industries that are not going away anytime, ever. Plumbing, electrical work, welding, those kinds of agriculture, mechanics. So we just need to make sure that our students are successful in that experience and prepared to succeed in life.
Thank you. Ms. Francic.
Summarize the question again.
Yes. What is a core issue that unites the 16th Legislative District, and how do you plan to act on that?
Well, I would tell you, I think the core issues that unite us are local government. Do our services work? Are our roads in good shape? Does our water, is it clean and is it drinkable? Is our sewer functioning? And that's why I think that my skills are so uniquely suited to represent you, because I have 19 years of experience in making that happen in Pasco. Education is also definitely a core experience. All of our children go to school, so that is essential. And then, because we are an agricultural community, being able to move our products to the ports and out into the world where they are marketed is absolutely critical to our economy. So those are the three issues that I think bring all three regions together. They impact each of us every single day, and I am uniquely qualified to address them.
Ms. Edwards.
Well, it is kind of a toss-up, I mean, there are definitely some things that I would like to see happen. I do believe that education, as an educator, it is very important, and that is something we do have in common. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of visiting Sharpstein School in Walla Walla, which is an amazing school. They have this dual language program, which was just amazing. And we were trying to bring some of those ideas back to Prosser, as that affects everybody in this state. I also am a big proponent that not every kid has to go to school, or excuse me, school, not university. We do need people. There is a shortage of engine mechanics. You know, if we don't have roads or trucks on the roads, we're not going to have food in our stores. We're not going to have clothes on our back. So that is important. The education of our children. If you want to go get your hands dirty and be a grease monkey like my older brother, feel free. If you want to work for Boeing for 30 years like my little brother, that's great. If you want to become a hairdresser, I mean, somebody's got to do something with my hair. You know, I think we shouldn't be pushing kids to go to college. Once you have everybody go to college and everybody has a degree, it becomes worthless. Not worthless, but worth less. And so I think that's a big uniting factor for our state, and we need to really start doing good things, better things in education for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Pomerantny.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to address two things that I not only believe in and like this question for, but explain what kind of person I am. I am a person who does things. In this case, the first is transportation. As some others have mentioned, I believe that transportation ties our district together, that we depend on each other. I'm not only a member of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is semi-local, but the Rural Transportation Planning Organization, which covers the county, and the Good Roads Association, which covers our entire region. For example, the work that's going on at Benton City right now. A little piece of that was helped with the lobbying of the Good Roads Association. I am proud to be part of these groups and doing something. The second is, let's just talk about current events, all the things going on with the police and the controversy that we've had in our nation that exists tonight. We, our council, met with our police chief on Monday. We talked about some of these things. We have talked about them before. There's a certain amount of controversy associated with that. We, and I'm missing my city council meeting tonight, but we are voting on whether we will create a special investigations unit to tie all of our communities together from Prosser to Dayton. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to question number 3. Mr. Rood will be the first to answer this. Many of you are involved in politics currently in a very diverse areas, Prosser, Walla Walla, City of Pasco, and I'm sure you guys are all intimately familiar with the City of Yakima. It was sued by the ACLU because it was proven that their hybrid city council voting system was in violation of the Federal Voting Rights Act. And right now, Pasco is actually in talks with the ACLU about a potential lawsuit right now if they don't change their voting system. Do you believe that all cities should implement district-based elections as opposed to a hybrid system?
You know, there was a bill in the last session called the Voting Rights. It was a state-based Voting Rights Act. I'm definitely open to solutions that increase fairness. I just think that we need to be really careful that we're not creating divisiveness in attempting to solve those problems. That particular act appeared to be creating district boundaries based on race, and I'm not sure that's the best choice. Obviously, the state and local governments must comply with federal law and court orders. So that's very important. But as far as district-based voting, I'm not sure, honestly. I'm not sure if that's the proper way to proceed at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Francic.
Thank Thank you. I'm going to have to be careful in my remarks because we do have an ongoing discussion with the ACLU. But let me talk about what Pasco's current system is. Currently, there are 4 seats up 1 year, and then 2 years later, there are 3 seats up. 2 of the districts are heavily Hispanic. So if the Hispanic voters turn out, they can control that district. Every time there is a city council election, there is an open seat, so anybody can run for it. We have listened to our Hispanic constituency. They have asked us to look at having 7 districts instead of 5. We are considering this. We actually went to the state and asked them if they would give us an exception, because by state law, we do not have that option at this point in time. We were, well, we weren't denied, but there were several decisions that came down that did not leave the county election people comfortable in putting that on the ballot. So we made the effort, but we were unable to do so. I think that Mr. Rood has a very good point, though, that we have to be very careful not to create more divisions among our populace. In Pasco, you're a Pasco resident, and we're trying to represent everyone. That is really important. I would say that when you look at the numbers, the people who are voting are the people who are determining who wins, and not everyone votes.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
This is something that we've experienced in Prosser as well. In Prosser, we are an at-large. The city council come from at-large. We do not have districts. We have 6 council members and then 1 mayor who is elected by the populace. In this letter that we got a couple weeks ago from the actually USDA, they were saying that in 2015 we were not diverse enough as a council. I am now the only woman on the council, and we have 1 Hispanic man on the council. Still not quite the percentage that they'd like to see, but we're working at it. Again, it's people who are interested in politics that tend to run for city council and mayor positions. So I think the way Yakima did it, the way I understand, is that they divided up Yakima into districts, but they were not based on race. It was just based on numbers. They had equal population in every district. And in fact, the woman who was mayor there lives in a mostly white neighborhood in her district. And so, you know, I don't think that that's such a bad idea. I think when you gerrymander, when you try and divide it by race, I think that's a problem. But in Prosser, I live a block away from my stepfather, who's also on council. So we're overly represented in my neighborhood, and there are some neighborhoods that don't have anybody. So if we are very careful in how we define what a district entails, I think that would be an okay thing to do.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pomerani.
Thank you. Again, I like this question. When we looked at what was going on up the road, we are an at-large council, like I believe Pasco, but we got together offline and decided, and I appointed a committee to look at this. What we find is we occasionally have racial balance, but what we also have is this 60-year-old retired values group. And so we're going to look at how we create a division, how we run an election. We have the 3 council people that are on this, and we have invited in some social scientists to help that group, and they are going to present their findings to our council in a couple months. And so we will have a report, and we will move forward so that we don't experience any of the criticism about this. So we're doing something, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Yes. You know, it really has created a lot of hardships, not only in Yakima, because I know Yakima, I don't know if they became a better city council or not over what happened. There certainly were resentments that were involved. I'd like to keep government as local as possible, to let the local governments make what decisions that they can. put together, like Alan was saying, put together partnerships, community people that can help resolve a problem. I truly believe in fair representation. Everybody should be represented fairly, but everybody should vote. And I think that's a lot of it. If we can get voting members, I mean, people in the community to vote, and for what's presented to them, that's going to alleviate a lot of the problem. So, as far as at-large councils and that type of thing, of course, there's a lot of them out there. Do we need to have areas like we do in our school district? Areas seem to work, but then what we do, the whole community votes. So you might represent your area, but the whole community will vote for you. So, and that seems to work. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Going to move on to question number 4. Ms. Francic, you'll be the first to answer this. This is an issue that's been over and over in the news, and most recently, certainly, policing issues. In the last few years, we've seen a number of deaths of citizens at the hands of police officers, many of these incidents being caught on camera in our digital age, yet we see how difficult it is to prosecute an officer, and especially in the state of Washington, given the wording and other circumstances related to our justifiable homicide statute. Initiative 873, it aims to amend existing state law because it says that our state law is the most regressive justifiable homicide statute in the nation. After hearing all this, what are your thoughts on this particular law and the current climate of mistrust between police and the community that it is protecting and serving?
Well, first of all, I would say that I don't think we have a mistrust in Pasco between our law enforcement officers and our citizens. We have taken a community policing approach. Our crime rate is down 83% from when I first took office in 1996. When we had a series of shootings, we actually had six deaths, and the one that, of course, rose most to the public attention was the Zambrano shooting, which I have to tell you, I was in Florida at the time visiting my son, and when I saw the video, I was just absolutely horrified. But we immediately turned all of that over to an independent group that would gather evidence and take a look at all of that. And when all of the facts came in, it was not a cut and dried situation, and it wasn't what we saw in that very short video clip. There was an awful lot more that had gone on prior to what we all saw and were horrified by. I think that our police officers have to have training, which means that you have to have money to have them trained. We've been asking the state to open up more seats so that we can get our police officers in. Right now, we have several officers that we've hired them, but we can't use them because they don't have seats. They haven't been trained and certified. But I think that we need to continue this dialogue with our community. I think we need to continue our community policing so that our citizens know who our police officers are, and we really need to address mental health issues because a lot of times when you see violence, it is a direct result of mental illness or drug addiction.
Thank you very much. Ms. Edwards.
Well, again, I'm on the city council in Prosser, and our police chief shows up at all of our city council meetings and reports on the happenings in the police department. And we are a small town, and we don't have a lot of issues like some of the larger cities do around us. However, we also have adopted a community policing co-op type of thing. And every time I see our police all over the place, they greet people, they walk down the sidewalk. Our community really we have great respect for our police officers. With all of the things that are in the news right now, everybody's kind of on this high alert that policemen are racist and they're always going to shoot, if you even look like you're going to reach for a gun. But I'm looking over here at this poster that's here in this hall right now, and it says everything matters. And what lasting memory are you creating now? And I think that most, if not all of our policemen have that in mind. They're not They're not the bad guys that people make them out to be. And so I need to be more familiar with the RCWs that deal with this and with the Constitution, how our state Constitution deals with this, to be all honest with you. But I think right now everybody's on heightened alert, and I think sometimes that just tends to create more tension and creates more push to sometimes do things that we shouldn't. Make haste slowly has always been my motto.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pomerani.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michael. Again, this is something that we have acted upon. One of the first things we did was, for the last couple of years, we have put policemen on the street, and we call them ambassadors, young people who meet with a lot of people who have issues, and it keeps things much calmer when you have people on the street instead of just in cars. The second thing is there are big signs around town with my name on it. People know I'm running for office. I have discussed with both our chief of police and our sheriff that they would like to see body cams. There are problems with doing that for a small municipality. Some problems with the Public Records Act where we can't handle the administrative burden of a video record, but our police believe that it can improve our relationship with citizens if everybody knows and believes that we're always being recorded when we're interacting with the police. I believe that's true too. I will co-sponsor legislation to help that to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Well, let me first say that the police officers, police departments should be commended for what they do for us, because they're the ones that keep us safe and give us our liberty. If we have to protect them, and too often, way too often, it just irritates me. It's political, and it's a continuation of it, and it's something that it's there. So what happens is the community, they're hearing what they're hearing, and they're hearing a lot of what they're hearing, and it might not be the right thing. And we have to understand the community. We have to understand why they're thinking what they're thinking. And so that's where things like building partnerships comes along, coalitions, so we can bring the communities together, the law enforcement and the communities, and then create values. If we can get the kids as they're going up, and I keep going back to the Boys and Girls Club and through schools and that type of thing, we really have to create values, but it starts at home. So if we can get the kids started off on the right foot at home and get parental involvement, it's going to help a lot of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rood.
Thanks for the question. I'd also like to commend law enforcement. It's a very difficult job, and I respect law enforcement very much for the work they do for us. Also like to add, I do believe that body cams are probably the biggest tool to help in these situations. It not only increases accountability for the officer, but also increases accountability for the individual who's having that encounter with the police officer. So if we can create that accountability on both sides of that interaction, I think that's very important. The Public Records Act hasn't been updated in a long time, and the biggest roadblock to instituting these body cams, I believe, is probably the Public Records Act. So what we need to do is take into account privacy on the part of individuals and make sure that we're not having officers. We need to have rules for officers so we're not recording interactions that are not appropriate to be recorded with the police officer. But also who has access to those recordings and how they're stored, if they're stored in a financially viable way. I believe that's really important as well. So amendments to the Public Records Act that can ensure that this is a financially viable option for us, I think is the best approach. Also, the training slots that were mentioned, I think is very important. And that's something that's hard to do if we're pledging never to vote for any kind of attacks. Those things cost money, and it's for public safety, and I support that.
Thank you. Let's move on to question number 5. Ms. Edwards, you'll be the first to answer this. And this will be our final question unless we want another question. We've got time for it, or from the audience, certainly. I'm posing this question on immigration because we do live in such a diverse area, and I think everybody at this seat has dealt with this issue. Given the U.S. Supreme Court of the United States is deadlocked on President Obama's DACA and DAPA programs, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is DACA, and DAPA stands for Deferred Action of Parental Accountability. So what would your plan be, at least from a state level, to deal with unauthorized immigrants who are vital to the economy and really needed in this region?
That is a difficult issue. I have a classroom of 20 students. Last year I did, and I had 15 of those were Hispanic. And I had one little girl come up to me, she's 6 years old, she goes, "I don't want Donald Trump to be president because he's going to send my mom back." Well, that's heartbreaking. And from a 6-year-old, it's a sticky situation, but I do think you are right. We have people who come up here, and they are vital to our economy, especially our agricultural economy. How do we handle that? I don't think we need to pick them all up and send them back home on a bus. I don't think that's an option. I also don't believe that full amnesty is also an option. What I believe is that if they have been here and they have not broken the law, other than the law of coming here illegally, I believe that perhaps we could, there could be a community service option, or because not everybody can afford to pay off a fine. There are some way, I think we need to find a workable solution to allow these people to stay who are vital to our, maybe, you know, we can fast track paperwork somehow that we can help them become productive citizens and not harm their families, not separate families. I think that's just, we need to really look at options, how we can institute some sort of, I don't want to say punishment, that sounds really harsh, but some way to hold them accountable for breaking the law without throwing them in jail or sending them back.
Thank you. Mr. Pomerani.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm an engineer. This is not my area of expertise, and I will use the same process in the legislature that I have used as the mayor of Walla Walla. When I don't know things, we have hearings, we pull experts in, we work through the problem as a large team. So I won't say today, I know the answer to the complexity of this problem. I have great empathy. I have Latino relatives right here in Pasco. I have similar relatives in the Walla Walla area. We need to work through this. We need to work through it as a culture. We need to work through it as a state. There is more issues coming with all the controversy and the instability of South America right now. So it's something we will be addressing in the next few years. I am proud to say I will go to the legislature, be part of a team, work on this with the other legislators, and we will come up with a citizen and legislative solution to some of these complex problems. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Yes, this is a tough one. You know, it's mostly a federal issue. The state is certainly impacted. Our state is by some of the issues created by whether they're illegal aliens or whether they're unregistered or whatever. But the reality in our district is that the farmers need the labor. And it seems that nobody else wants to do the work. So from there, where do you go? And I agree with Alan on this one. I really think that there has to be a lot more discussion that's given before you can say, oh, send them all back home, because what would that do to our economy? We have to figure out something where we can get everybody registered, the ones that are here, and then I would hate to think what would happen to our economy if we didn't have people to pick our fruits and vegetables and grapes and whatever else. So that's our dilemma, and it is a big dilemma, and it's going to take more than my brain to figure it out. And we put together smart people and work with them and go for there. So thank you.
Mr. Root.
Thank you. So this really is a federal issue. Immigration policy isn't something that the state legislature is authorized to address. What the legislature does deal with legislatively that relates to this issue, I think, is the availability of state resources to people who are here illegally. I would like to just point out regarding education, the state does have an obligation to provide ample provision for the education of all children in this state. So it is important that children that are brought here receive a quality education because they're going to be members of this society. And again, as a fiscally conservative, this is an example of being proactive and making sure that kids are reaching adulthood ready to succeed. So there are services at the state level that do need to be offered, but the federal government does need to take action on this issue. So it does affect the states, and the federal government needs to get a handle on illegal immigration. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Francic.
Thank you. Well, my family are survivors of what is now called the English genocide of the Irish. We came to this country because we were starving to death, and it was our only choice, and America welcomed us. We had a lot of hard jobs. We were miners, we were butchers, we were gold miners, we're farmers. I don't know why the United States has such a broken federal policy on immigration, but that needs to be fixed, and there's nothing I can do about it as a state legislator. However, I do agree with what Mr. Rood said about all of the children that are coming in here deserve an education. And we can't say that they don't, because A, it's our job to educate them, and B, their parents are paying taxes while they're here. One of the things that I would urge our federal legislators to do is open the borders back up. It used to be, and we saw this in the school system a lot, that people would come up and follow the crops and then they would go home. But they don't have that option anymore, because once you're here, it's really hard to get back and forth across that border. So we have made it very difficult for people who might have only wanted to come for a short season to come and go back home and return to their loved ones. It is a broken system. I cannot fix it as a state legislator because I will not have that ability, but it is certainly something I would support our federal colleagues fixing.
Thank you. We do have time for one more question. Mr. Pomeranning, I'll start with you. This is from our audience. For the 9th and 16th, well, obviously both, how can we create a fair tax in our state for everyone? It's a pretty broad question. That's what it said, tax, right?
That's a pretty open question.
Yeah, it's pretty wide open
I
there.
think what that is suggesting is that there should be an income tax. I will point out that first, the Constitution limits income taxes to 1%. So if we suggest that there should be an income tax, we're implying that somehow that would be graduated across the income levels, when in fact we're prevented from doing that. So an income tax at this time is not a viable option for our state. So how do we do it? I believe the major issue that's driving this question, of course, is how do we solve the education funding issue? And really, if we pay the same rate for every household in the state, if we level and equalize the tax, that is fair based on the level and property values that we have. So I think what's driving the question here is how do we solve this major problem with funding, sustainable funding in education? We can do it with the plan that's already been started in the legislature, and I will participate in that process. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins.
Yes, I certainly do not want any state income tax, and I'll be against in whatever form. I agree a lot that what is driving this is the fact with levy swap, levy equalization, that type of thing, because it's a big burden with the McCleary decision. My only concern to that, it will alleviate a lot of it because the taxes will be coming, and I'm for it in the right form. The taxes will be coming from the communities that are like, say, Pasco. They raise X amount of dollars. They send it to the state. But what happens if they had a good levy and they were making more money off of the levy than what the state gives them back? And then in talking to the superintendent of our school district, his concern is, and other superintendents is, what stipulations will be put on the money when it does come back from the state legislature after it's been through that other layer? And it may not be able to be used for what school districts can use the levy money for, which would create havoc with local school districts. I am for a solution. I think the solution is there if it's put together in the right way. The legislature's working hard at that, and that's something that I would love to get involved with because I'm passionate about it.
Thank you, Mr. Rude.
Thank you. So typically, taxes in some way, shape, or form are going to have a negative impact. That's why it's important to keep taxes as low as possible and provide services efficiently. About 52% of the state's operating budget or revenues come from the retail sales and use tax, about 20% from the B&O tax, 11% from state property tax, and then 17% from a variety of other taxes, including the retail or the real estate excise tax, liquor tax, cigarettes, marijuana, a pretty long list. The B&O tax is, I believe, is probably the most unfair of those taxes. The retail sales tax is probably one of the most fair taxes. I support taxes typically. A good example would be the gas tax. It's for a dedicated purpose. It taxes the users of the system. So use taxes are generally a more fair tax, and those are the taxes that I lean towards supporting most. There's something called a fair tax at the federal level, a proposal. That's a federal issue related to income tax. But I think it's important to make sure that any tax that we're supporting is most fair in the way that that it collects from individuals.
Thank you, Ms. Francic.
I believe the purpose of government is to provide a platform so that we, the citizens, can come together and purchase services that we can't individually purchase. So for instance, a city road is $1 million a mile. I cannot buy a road on my own. But if I work collectively with my fellow residents, we can have city streets that will take me to and from work and the grocery store. You have to have taxes, and you have to have a revenue stream that will not only build those things that you deem good for society, like clean drinking water and sewers that work, but you have to have maintenance funding. And that means when you have an individual who comes through and starts carving things out, like I-695, let's go ahead and cap the property tax at 1%. Without any regard for the fact that we are bargaining with our police and fire officers for raises of 2% and 3%, you're going to get squeezed, and pretty soon your maintenance is going to change. If you have somebody who says, oh, you know what, we don't really need to pay those car taxes, you only need $30, which is not a number that has anything to do with the reality of what it costs to drive on a street. If you vote for that, then you're forcing the government and you're forcing cities and local communities to choose other sources. Pasco at this point in time has moved everything to sales tax. Sales tax is not fair, and it is very volatile. So when the economy goes down, so does our system. So I guess I'd tell you in conclusion, I'm willing to look at everything, but we need to start having adult conversations about taxes and talk about the value we're getting for our dollar, because taxes bring us a lot of services that we want and we need.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards.
Well, I do agree that we have plenty of taxes in this state, and we have the dubious distinction of being number 2 in the nation in gas taxes. both combined federal and state. We're right behind Maryland, and I think they moved into first place, but we have these distinctions in our state of having very high taxes, higher than many other states. You know, we keep coming back to education and the McCleary decision where we have to fully fund education. First, before you do anything, we need to fully and specifically define what basic education is. Right now, it's this big nebulous thing that nobody really has a great definition for. Is it K-12? Okay, so it's K-12. I get that, kindergarten through 12th grade. But what within that are we paying for? I mean, what are we supposed to fully fund? Are we fully funding teacher salaries? Are we funding the supplies in the schools? Are we funding, you know, I know that I get $250 a year to spend in my classroom. That's an arbitrary amount that was set by my principal because she has a certain budget and for her school and she gets to decide who gets what. I think before we do anything, we need to fully define what it is we're expected to pay for. And I think we can do it with existing taxes, but we have to fully define it first.
Thank you all for your answers. We're going to have closing statements, and Mr. Jenkins, we'll start with you.
Very good. Again, I would like to thank all of you for coming today to listen to our differing opinions. I live the issues of small business, education, and agriculture through my own businesses and my position on the school board. I know that what needs to be done to create jobs and to improve our children's education. I am familiar with our farmers' needs because I'm in agriculture myself. I have 30 years of community service and have been able to thrive in the private sector my entire life. We need to elect a candidate with experience and leadership skills to represent the voters of our 16th district. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rood.
Thank you for the opportunity. I would just like to kind of throw in why I'm running for this office. Ultimately, I would like to be able to have the opportunity to make a positive difference in individuals' lives and also be an advocate for our small business owners who ultimately are the backbone of this economy. Most of the businesses in this country are classified as small businesses. I do believe that it's really important to work in a bipartisan fashion if we expect to get anything done in Olympia. I've been there working for Representative Walsh and listening to constituents of this district for the last 2 sessions, and believe through that experience I'd be able to hit the ground running as a freshman member. So through that experience, I believe that I'd effectively represent this district. I've also, I mentioned bridge building that I think is very important. I've been endorsed by former Secretary of State Sam Reed, over 10 legislators, including all of the ranking members for education-related committees, the League of Education Voters, and Public School Employees of Washington. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Ms. Francic.
Thank you. When you get your ballot, you will see that Rebecca Francic is running as a Democrat. Before you vote, I'm asking you to consider our region does not have a single voice that represents our needs to the Democratic caucus in Olympia. Consider the disadvantage of having all our representation restricted to one party. I don't know about you, but I spread my risk. In the past, legislators without local government experience have hurt our towns and cities by diverting the Public Works Trust Fund into the general fund, depriving our communities of low-interest loans for local infrastructure needs. They have taken our share of liquor revenues, depriving our towns of funding that we count on for local public safety needs. If you believe that local government experience will benefit you at the state level, vote for Rebecca Francic. If you believe that infrastructure corridors are critical to our economy, vote for Rebecca Francic. And if you believe a strong education system makes us stronger as a community and as a state, vote for Rebecca Francic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Edwards.
I'd like to say thank you again for having us all here today. It's been a real privilege being able to talk to you. Again, I would like to let you know I was a single mom. I raised 2 children successfully. I have a wonderful grandson who lives in Spokane. I don't get to see nearly enough. I served in the Marine Corps. I have a business degree and worked in business for 25 years. I transferred then into teaching. I am an elected city council person. I used to change the oil in my car and change the points and plugs. I've done it all, ladies and gentlemen. I have 3 brothers. I am known in my school district and in my building that I am the one to come talk to you if you need something done and something fixed. I have people all the time calling me before city council meetings saying, hey, I need to talk to you about this. I have an ear. I talk to anybody. It doesn't matter what your label is. It doesn't matter. The other thing I'd like to remind people that in the state legislature right now, in the House, men outnumber women 2 to 1. So it wouldn't hurt to have a woman's voice in the legislature. Thank you for your time, and I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pomerantny.
Thank you, Michael. Again, I think part of our process in the campaigning is to create relationships, to understand the issues. I'd like to thank Mr. Felix Gonzalez? Vargas. I scribbled too much. I want to create a relationship with the Latino Coalition. I'd like to use that when I get to the legislature, if you can help me understand some of the issues that you're representing. I'd also like to thank the women voters, and I will represent your issues as well. This is a representative position, and we are touring the area in a campaign to help understand what the issues are. So I thank you for inviting me to Pasco tonight. I will work hard for you as I have done in Walla Walla. I will do the same in Olympia. Thank you.
I want to thank you all. We have some really strong candidates up here, so it's going to be a really tough decision. So let's give them a round of applause for coming up here and sharing their ideas. We're going to take a short break right now, and the folks for position 2 are going to come up here. So take a break, relax, and we'll be right back. Tonight we're going to be hearing from the candidates we already heard in the Legislative District 16, Position 1. These are the folks from Position 2. Again, for their understanding, we're going to be using the following format. Each candidate may make a 2-minute opening statement. We will then move to a question-answer period with a 1.5 time limit on responses. All candidates will answer the same questions, alternating who goes first, who goes last. We have prepared questions, but we're also taking written questions from the audience. So again, if you want to be part of the process, look for one of the volunteers. Make sure it's legible. The last one was a little bit tough to read, I got to be honest with you, so I went on my gut that it was tax, and it was, so I have kind of chicken scratch too. Thank goodness for typewriters. Well, that's when I started in the news business. We don't have those anymore. Now we have computers and these phones that don't go away, but I'm digressing. Anyway, candidates, I will point out to you our timer. She's going to hold up that sign for you. When you have 15 seconds left to speak, then she'll hold up a stop sign as well. You do not need to stop in the middle of your sentence, but complete that thought for us. So with all that being said, let's get this party started. It's my pleasure to introduce the candidates running for state representative from the 16th Legislative District, Position 2. They are Ricardo Espinosa, Terry R. Neely, and Gary Downing. I got a lot of papers. Let me get them all together. All right. Mr. Espinosa, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, and thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you, community members, for coming and joining us tonight. It's an important civic responsibility that is apparent to you, and I wish more people would come. But fortunately, we are being recorded, so there's an opportunity for more to get to know the candidates of the 16th district, positions 1, 2, and District 9. I'm here tonight because I think I can make a huge difference in what's going on in Olympia. I think I can make a huge difference for this district. I was a former school board member for 10 years in Pasco, and I was very, very active and made a lot of great relationships. Relationship building is a strength of mine. Collaboration is a strength of mine. And I think that it's apparent to see that Olympia needs that. We have to have legislators that can reach across the aisle. We have to have legislators that can talk to other people, and it's so polarized anymore, and it's getting worse over the last several years, dozen years, and I think I can help to bridge that gap to try to get some work done, and it begins with as simple as proposing for the legislature, let's finish on time. On the last 2 sessions that they've had, they haven't done that. And the last biennium, it was 28,000 state employees got layoff notices because the legislature couldn't do their work. We have to do better than that. The citizens need us to do better than that, and I can work to bridge that gap. In my background and professional experience, again, I mentioned I was a school board member. I have experience working at Hanford for a dozen years and understand issues over there that are very important to the Tri-City community. United States Marine Corps, and Mary Ruth, thank you for your service as well. But my strengths and my background feed into this, and a lot of people, when Senator Hewitt announced he was not run again, I started getting phone calls and emails saying, Ricardo, what does this mean to you? And I started looking into it, and I thought that, I could still contribute, and I've been away for a little while. I earned a bachelor's degree in accounting. I am a financial analyst for the Department of Corrections. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neely.
And thank you, and thanking all of you for being here tonight and having this forum. I think it's important for all of us to learn about the candidates. Just a quick background, I graduated from WSU in business, from Gonzaga Law School with a law degree. I practiced law for about 40 years and owned a small business. I was very active in my community of Dayton. I was also was prosecuting attorney there for 16 years. I'm married for 47 years, have 2 children, 5 grandchildren. And the last 7 years, I have served you in this district as your state representative for position 2. I thought a little bit about whether to run again, but I decided to do it because, number one, I just still feel it's important to publicly serve, and I want to continue to do that for 2 more years. Also, there's still work to be done. The number one issue is the McCleary decision about education. It's a huge, complex problem. I'm on the Finance Committee. I'm ranking on the Finance Committee, so I'm going to be part of that decision-making process. It's got to be done in 2017 because the court has said you've got to have that decision made by January of 2018. Also, I'm working as a leader on the public records request issue reform. We need help there to get that accomplished. And also energy. I'm passionate about energy to preserve our wonderful hydro and nuclear electricity producing entities that we have in our state. We're lucky that we have those. I've certainly enjoyed working with the entities and local agencies in Pasco. I supported the Lewis Street overpass transportation package, the sewage disposal project for the food processing plants, and then recently, this last year, the infrastructure for the DNR property in north part of Pasco. And so I am here to ask for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Downing.
Oh, sorry. I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters, the Latino Coalition, also the City of Pasco, and the City of Richland for this event this evening. Thanking all of you for being here and having the opportunity to listen to what we have to say. My name is Gary Downing. I've been a long-time member of the Tri-Cities. Actually, I came up here when I was 4 years old from Portland, but that was back in 1950 when they were still creating the highways around here. You know, I graduated out of Pasco High, went into service, and after I left the service, I traveled across the United States. And I worked through a lot of those states, and I had the opportunity to meet people. I had the opportunity to understand jobs and the situations of those people's lives. To me, it was an experience that you can't get in college. It was an experience that you don't get in some kind of a classroom. I found people that were living in poverty, total poverty, in Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Kentucky, you know. And it gave me the experience and knowledge to know that I never want to see the state of Washington to ever look like that. My name's Gary Downing, and I'm running for the 16th Legislative District for the 2nd seat.
Thank you all for those opening statements. We'll begin with question 1 right now. Mr. Espinosa will be the first to answer. This is from our audience. It concerns education, and certainly a lot of hot-button issues happening right now that have been front and center in the news. The McCleary decision, charter schools fully funding K through 12, another issue. The question from our audience member is this: how can the state address the disparity in teacher salaries among school districts in setting the teacher salaries?
Some of the issues that were discussed earlier for position 1 dealt with public education, and the theme that seemed to me that kept coming out was local control, and teacher salaries are negotiated locally by the district. There's the state does provide, but there's a lot of negotiations that go on with the districts, and I would, as a legislator, work with districts to do the best that we can and find resources for teachers. Sister-in-law is a teacher, and as a school board member, former school board member here, these were issues that we kept looking at, and what can we do more? Not all of it is going to be in the form of dollars, but how can we make the educational experience for teachers a better deal? And if it dealt with bringing in the PTOs, ATPs, groups, parent-teacher groups to help fund classroom projects. Earlier we heard there was $200 and some odd for a classroom teacher and to do what she could do, and we work to enhance that locally. And if the state can provide more, I think the state should provide more, and look at where other states are and look at where we are. And if we're trying to produce world-class schools here in Washington State, public schools, that would be the choice of parents. I think that's something that we have to take into consideration a little more seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neely.
Thank you. Well, of course, the McCleary decision has created a really tough situation. We have, as a legislature, poured approximately $4 billion just in the last couple bienniums into K-12 education. It's a lot of money. A lot of people wonder where that goes. But on the same thought stream is that the schools need it. We're increasing the population. We're over 1 million students now out there, and so the funding is needed. But there's problems out there. There is a disparity to get right to the question. Teachers are being paid from local levy dollars. For example, Everett and Mercer Island, Bellevue, some of those in the west side, a big source of that revenue comes from those sources, which the Supreme Court said is wrong. That's basic education needs to pay salaries of teachers. But it's more expensive to live in the Seattle area than it is in the Walla Walla or Pasco area too. So that's an issue that's come up often. We as a legislature caused part of the problem recently because we said that there's a lot of money that goes toward MSOCs, for example. We didn't tell the local school districts what to use that money for. So it created a big fight between the teachers and, of course, the school districts on how to use that funding. So part of the answer is the levy equalization. Part of the answer is to have collective bargaining at the state level. And then let's look at whether we need to balance that a little bit more with regionalization. And my time is up, or I'd get into more of that detail.
Thank you. Mr. Downing.
Could you read it one more time, please?
Certainly. How can the state address the disparity in teacher salaries among school districts in setting teacher salaries?
Well, you know, the problem is a lot of times, and the reason I can speak on this is because I just retired from Richland School District after 30 years. I understand the problems that are facing most of the teachers and classified people in the districts. You know, when we try and negotiate something as far as some kind of a raise, we have to depend on what the legislature actually sends down. And if they say we're going to send down 2%, and then at the same time, then we got to face a 3% hike in health care, most of the people in the school districts today are actually earning less today than what they did 10 years ago. Now, if we want to help people, we need to work on this McCleary case, and we need to get it straightened out. If we're actually going to do something about education, we need to start working on where the money's going to come from. And I say that when we go ahead and talk about McCleary, what we need to do is talk about all the money that's funding education right now and stick it on a shelf. And then we go over here to the lotto, which was originally set up because our forestry industry actually was failing. And the lotto was set up to promote education. It was set up so that it was going to fund public education. Instead, it went into the general fund. I say take the lotto money that's there now, put it into the school district, all of it, and then we worry about the differences.
Thank you. We're going to move to question number 2. Mr. Neely, you'll be the first to answer this question. This one also from our audience. It concerns public records, and a lot of you guys are familiar. It's been in the news recently about Donna Zink of Mesa, who has requested a lot of public data, and a Franklin County judge actually awarded her $350,000 because she wasn't properly given some data that she wanted. It's something that I often deal with, public records, within the framework of journalism. So the question is this: the Public Records Act is crushing our cities with data miners and abusive large-scale data requests. What can be done about this to stop, these type of settlements from happening? Because it can really crush a city the size of yours.
Well, I don't have enough time to get into all the details, but I'm the co-leader on the reform for the legislature with Representative Joan McBride, who's a Democrat from Kirkland. So this summer we're working hard on that. We have had 2 big stakeholders meetings with over 40 people attending both of those meetings. I was on the phone yesterday for an hour trying to break that up into different groups to work on the issues, the separate issues. The quick answer I can give everybody from my perspective is charge a reasonable cost recovery, reasonable, to help the city or the school district or the port district to, if they have to hire more people to answer the public request, they ought to at least receive some reasonable compensation from the requester to help defray those terrific costs. Now, having said all that, I am very much in favor of transparency and open transparency. Our government needs to be able to provide their records. But for a lot of the small entities, they just flat out don't have the resources or the money or the people or the expertise to do that. And so that's why we need some reform, because of the modern technology. It's pretty easy to push a button and demand 1 million records. Whereas in 1970s, when that bill first went into, there's a reasonable charge of like a nickel or 10 cents per page. It made some sense then. It doesn't make so much sense now, so we need to fix that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Downey.
Well, I think it's correct in saying we need transparency. As far as public records, I'm sure there must be a process any place that we have public records where people can go in and apply for the information. And I'm sure there are rules and regulations that actually stand with those things. I'm not really familiar with that. So, the best thing I can tell you is that I'm going to be honest with you, and it's something I would have to look into.
Thank you. Mr. Espinosa.
I'm supportive of the public records process, but I know that it can be amended and it should be amended, and especially what happened in Mesa. If the fine was almost 2-3 times more than the city's budget, and that was ridiculous that it would even come out that way for what they did. They weren't they weren't trying to hide anything, and they weren't trying to discourage somebody from doing what they were doing and looking for public records. And part of the process maybe for the legislature is not so much, how should the fines be commensurate to the budget of the entity that's being challenged, but as well if there's a process in place that was respective of the size of the organization that says this is the amount of work that's reasonable for an entity on a public disclosure request, because a lot of times for governmental agencies, the archive process is several years, and to go through boxes and boxes and boxes of information that is stored, looking for all the records so that you're not in violation of that request, it does take a lot of time, and it does take people to pull away from what they are doing, which normally isn't that. So I think that there should be caps, if you will, for the fines that do come out, but as well there should be a reasonable accommodation for municipalities.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 3. This again is from the audience as well. Concerns mental health. Mr. Downing, you'll be first to answer this. Mental health across the state of Washington is fragmented, disjointed. It needs a major overhaul. Our jails are filled with the mentally ill who are not receiving vital services, especially when it comes to crisis response. That's when somebody first really starts to, really have some issues at home or wherever they might be. In March, I covered the story of Mark Moreno, a young man, a Benton County resident who died inside the Benton County Jail. His family told us in several news stories that they desperately sought mental health services for Mark before he was arrested. 8 days later, he died inside the Benton County Jail for various reasons, but he wasn't able to receive mental help. How do we avoid deaths like Mark Moreno's? Because even the Benton County Sheriff has been on record with myself several times saying that, Mike, I simply don't have the resources to handle the mentally ill inside my jail, and I'm becoming the first responder. So the question is this: what is your strategy for the challenge concerning the mentally ill in the criminal justice system, and how do we stop that caseload?
Well, I think first off, if we're going to have people entering a jail, we need to have people in the police department that are capable to understand the mental illness problems. In other words, we need to have somebody trained in the police departments who can recognize the issues and the problems, and that way they don't slap them into a cell where actually they're going to end up getting into problems there. We put them out someplace where they can actually be helped. Mental illness is something that we're finding more and more nowadays, and I think that people need to look at it from various different aspects. I know that in Seattle, and I know in Salt Lake City and all these different areas, they're talking about how they're building communities. And it's true. As a matter of fact, in one of the communities in Salt Lake City, they're providing housing for homeless and mentally ill people. The problem that they're looking at is the fact that with case management, people will actually oversee all of these people. They are working on individuals, and those who have bodily sound mind and able to work, they go ahead and put them to work. The Housing First program in Utah reduced chronic homelessness by 91% in social services, social work, hospitalization, and jails, cost by 40%. You know, we need to increase wages for people in this state so that a lot of these people that aren't working, that are having mental problems right now because they're getting stressed out and they're worrying about their bills and they're worrying about how they're going to pay their car payment or house. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Downing. Mr. Espinosa.
Thank you. I'm supportive of public and private partnerships. I'm supportive of issues being taken care of at a local control level. If, say, for example, there was the issues that are here in Pasco. Pasco deals with as best they can, working with community service, non-governmental entities to try to work on the problem. Recently, Benton and Franklin County got together, and there was an article in the paper just the other day about they didn't get along so well, these two counties and their commissioners, but they managed to do something that was good for the community, and that's what communities have to do. You have to find the issues, you have to put the personalities aside and get the work done that the community needs to do. And the state needs to be involved too, but the state can't do it all, so it's a collaborative effort. And if it's more space that's needed, tax credits for building facilities is a possibility that the legislature could be supportive of. there's a lot of issues that it isn't going to be just the legislature that's going to resolve it, but there has to be, I believe, public and private partnerships is the route, and local control as best we can, and then the legislature support as best they can as well.
Thank you, Mr. Neely.
Well, thank you. This is a problem, no question about it. First of all, when somebody really acts out or commits a crime, even though they have mental health problems, you've got to have somebody react to it, and it's going to be the law enforcement, which is what they're going to have to do. And if they need to put them in jail, okay, they need to put them in jail. The problem is, if they're mental health issue, then as the judge ruled in a recent case that affects our state, they've got to have a mental health evaluation within 7 days. That's our problem, is that we don't have enough mental health trained people, mental health professionals on site now in our state to be able to get in and address all those mental health patients. So that's the problem that we have in our state. I agree. I think the public-private partnership, as Ricardo brought up, is part of the answer. I know that Walla Walla did pass a 0.1 addition to their sales tax, which really helped that city and county address that problem. So they've got some funding to deal with it where most entities do not. But boy, I'll tell you, I've heard horror stories, for example, in Seattle and Harborview and so forth, how stacked up those people are. Big problem. They even have a court system within the hospital now to deal with a lot of these issues. So we need to get more training. We did put more money as a legislature into the mental health department, but we need the trained individuals to implement those dollars.
All right, thank you all for those answers. Moving on to question number 4. Immigration is the topic, and we certainly live in a complex area dependent upon immigrant labor. We have a mix of rural, we have a mix of municipalities here, and you know, the word immigration is really hot-tempered, and it can bring up a lot of feelings. Given that the U.S. Supreme Court of the United States is deadlocked on President Obama's DACA and DAPA programs, what would your plan be dealing with unauthorized immigration in our area, which for farmers really is a vital part of their entities many times? And Mr. Espinosa, you'll go first.
It was mentioned earlier that it's a federal issue, but as a local person, and if I were to be in the legislature, I would work to press comprehensive immigration. Doc Hastings, former congressman, was here on this issue, and there's a number of issues, and I spent some time talking with him about it. And by way of background, my father was here illegally, and yet we were able to do well. 3-4 brothers made it into the Marine Corps, did well. College, everybody is contributing very well in the community. Everybody's been a success, and through the process later on in his life, you know, he was naturalized. So immigration, it's a broken system, and the federal government does need to address it, and delaying it. It's unfortunate that they won't take action. You have candidates at the congressional level are running to the presidency. Even 8 years ago, if I'm elected president, this is what I'll do for immigration, and it hasn't happened, and there was opportunity lost. And now, again, it's here again, and this time it's a lot more volatile. So I think as a candidate, and if elected as a legislature, I would stress and press for comprehensive immigration, where part of that is there has to be a piece that deals with the border. There has to be a piece that deals with the needs of our employers, our farmers. There has to be a piece that deals with the people that are here now. And the plan would be a residency status for those that are following the laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neely.
Well, thank you. And most of the candidates have said, yes, this is a federal issue, and I've got to agree. It really is. It's not a state issue. As a legislator, we can do very little about it, although I will say some states have passed laws to help implement whatever they're trying to do. So I can stop right there. I mean, there's not much we can do. I can go on and give you my opinion on some of these issues, and I will. I'm a lawyer. I think that we need to live by the rule of law, And as was just stated, unfortunately, this law has really not been very instrumental or very effective, and it hasn't been followed, and there's been a lot of illegal immigration into our state. It's not only for the farmers. You look at Seattle, or you look at some of the high-tech industries, or the building, construction industries, et cetera. They can't get enough employees in the high-tech industry. We're importing a lot of folks from China and India into those high-tech jobs. So we're talking about some pretty serious dollars and salaries and money at stake in this issue also. So we need to come up with a solution, if people are here, how to assimilate or get them involved in our society as legally and as quickly as we can with certain structure in place, and to have those borders be able to have people go back and forth, but legally, not illegally.
Thank you. Mr. Downing.
I think that we've got a problem. Everybody knows that, but it's a federal issue like it says. But you know something? It's also a state issue. It's a community issue. I don't care where you are. We have kids here that have been brought up in this area that, you know, their parents aren't legal. They're here, but they work. But those kids deserve to have the best education we can give them. We need to make sure that those parents also have the opportunity to work. You know, they pay taxes. They buy a house, they pay taxes. They go down to the store, they pay taxes. You know, we got a lot of people in this country that don't pay taxes, and, you know, they're legal. The way I look at it is we have a lot of people right now, though, that are in this country that we need to make sure they become United States citizens. But until that happens, I think we need to make sure that we understand those kids. I mean, I tell you what, if you ever met some of the dreamers, they're the greatest group in the world, I guarantee it. I mean, you know, just sitting and talking to them and understanding the problems that they face if mom and dad get deported, you know, how would you feel? I know how I would feel. Tim, I got to stop yet? Sorry.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 5. Mr. Neely, you'll be the first to answer this question. The city of Yakima, they were recently sued by the ACLU because it was proven that their hybrid city council voting system was in violation of the Federal Voting Rights Act. Pasco and Walla Walla are now looking to change how they elect their city council positions. In fact, the city of Pasco is in deep conversation with the ACLU, who may bring a potential lawsuit against the city if they don't change their districts. Because we are such a diverse area and we represent so many different types of people, you know, in this district, which covers Walla Walla, Pasco, all the way out into Benton City and other areas. Do you believe that all cities should implement district-based elections as opposed to a hybrid system?
My quick answer is no. There's a big difference between big cities and little cities and where those cities are located. This issue certainly came up in the legislature this last year. I voted against the proposal. Primarily because there's already a federal law that's in place that addresses this issue. This proposed bill in the state almost copied that, so all it did was give another layer of laws. And in fact, the state bill, now that I think about it, was the language was about 10 times longer than what the federal law was, which just creates a lot more legal issues of which somebody can bring a lawsuit. It just brings more legal issues that we did not need to have. That's why I voted against it, because I think the federal law is in existence, is certainly available for anybody to use. The bottom line here is qualified candidates. If you can come up with a qualified candidate and they go out and want the job and get the support, then boy, I'll vote for them. I don't care if they're black or purple or blue in color or whatever their culture is. If they're the most qualified, our system is set up in the United States to where they have a good opportunity to prevail. Now, if there is something going on to where there's purposefully creating districts or something that align different cultures against others, then yes, then I think there's a place there to where that needs to be, that law needs to be available. But that's why I voted the way I did, and that's my answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Downing.
Well, I think the city of Pasco right now is dealing with that, and they're talking about 7 different districts or something like this. I think the one thing that's very important, I don't care how you think about redistricting anything. If most of you realize, it's been a few years, but we've had a lot of redistricting done here, and it was gerrymandered to a point where, you know, we actually have Republican vote or Republican voice in this area, and we've had it for 20 years. You know, it's time for a change. I don't know that redistricting is the answer, but I think we'll find out. We'll see what happens with Pasco.
Thank you, Mr. Espinosa.
Yeah, I followed this issue a little bit, and actually it was attended some meetings with the Pasco City Council and the city manager. And on this issue, and what it is Yakima got sued, and it cost them almost $3 million. $3 million taxpayer dollars that didn't have to happen, but it did based on the elections. And now other cities are looking at it with high minority populations. And what the cities are asking, or what some of the cities are asking for from the legislature, is that, number one, the federal laws don't address the legal requirements that a county auditor or a county prosecutor would say, city, go ahead and do this, you're safe to do this. That was the issue in Pasco. And so Pasco, actually, the city manager and Mayor Matt Watkins spoke in favor of a bill allowing district-only representation. And what it means is, if you've got city council members, you will have 7 districts in your city divided up by the city council, and the members in that district will vote for their councilman or vote for their school board member, or and that's all that some of the citizens are asking for. So it isn't a mandatory, you will do this, cities by the legislature. It is an opportunity that's created for cities that do want to do this, that you have the coverage of the legislature that will allow you to do this, and you don't have to worry or depend on a federal law that doesn't fit so well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to question number 6. This concerns oil. This has been a pretty hot topic in the news lately. Oil trains are being hauled in from the Bakken oil fields. They're coming through the state of Washington at a high rate. A recent derailment in the Columbia River Gorge area, a real reminder of how dangerous this commodity can be coming through our state and the Northwest in general. Mr. Downing, you'll be first to answer this question. Are you for oil shipments coming through our state, and how should the state be involved in its regulation?
You know, I have to say that I'm not for the idea of the oil shipments coming through the state, or coal as far as that goes. The only problem is it's going to be affecting jobs. But I think that we have to take into account the safety, and we have to take into account what happens to our property if one of those trains derail. I don't think I want to see a lot of oil spilled out here in the river. You know, we've seen a lot of events where they had the BP spill as far as that goes, and that cost billions of dollars, and it still isn't really cleaned up. I think that oil is one of the messiest things we can come up with. I'm not really for seeing them come through here, but you know, they've been doing it. I'm not sure what the answer is. I guess we'll have to just get together as communities and find out what people think, because that's really what legislators are supposed to do, isn't it?
Thank you. Mr. Espinosa.
I am supportive of oil trains coming through. I'm supportive of coal trains coming through. If they don't come through Pasco and our switching yards, if they're going to come through somewhere else, whether it's down south or up north in Canada, there are jobs that are in place, but there's laws that are in place too, in particular heavy environmental laws that regulate how you should do things and what your responsibilities are. I've talked to a couple of people who were involved with the cleanup in Oregon, and it was just massive, the amount of money that was being poured in to clean that up as quickly as they can, to restore it better than what it was, and to look at their causes and learn from it so that it doesn't happen again. I think that the Columbia River is a huge resource for the Northwest, not just Washington, not just the 16th District. But I think that there's so many things that could happen. And other, whether it's a chemical accident or whether it's Hanford or whether it's Grand Coulee breaks and all of us go underwater. You know, there's a number of things that could happen, but unfortunately, or I would rather say, fortunately, there's only been one major accident, and the railroad's been responsible, I believe, in working to clean it up as best they can and restore and make better what it was.
Thank you. Mr. Neely.
And thank you, and I certainly support the oil trains also. That's commerce. I don't want to stop commerce. It's difficult if our state puts up a red flag, said you can't come through our state. If the Northwest in our state is vitally positioned with the Pacific Rim, where the huge exports and imports come through our state. So we've got to keep that in mind. So that's one reason we need to keep our roads, our highways, our bridges, and our railroads in top condition. There are certainly strict laws that cover the environmental protections, and there's money that's set aside for that. There's big insurance policies that are involved. Because there's some legislation that was voted for that assured that out of each barrel of oil that passes through the state, there's a certain percentage that goes into this fund. And it certainly helps our job situation. So my quick answer is yes, I'm okay with oil trains coming through.
Thank you. That concludes our questions. We'll now have our closing statements. Mr. Espinosa, you'll go first.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for staying as long as you have and enduring. My name is Ricardo Espinosa. I'm running for this position because I believe I can make a difference, and I believe a difference is needed in Olympia. There's things that the dynamics of Olympia is huge, that if you agree with what's going on there, then I would say, vote for our incumbent. But if you think that things have to change, I would encourage you to support me and allow me to represent you. My background, again, is just really well suited for so many of the issues that this district faces, and there's so many. We don't have the time to share the wonderfulness of this relationship of us working together to represent you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Espinosa. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here and listening. I think it's really important to be part of our democratic process. And to learn what the issues are and to have a say in those issues. So I would like to continue as your state representative for the next 2 years. I'm certainly in favor of personal responsibility, and I'll continue to support businesses, especially small businesses. It's important to keep our economy strong. That helps everybody, even increases the tax revenue to the state if that concerns a lot of people, which it should. I have the experience to accomplish these tasks and to meet these goals, so I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Downing.
Thank you again for all of you being here this evening. We really didn't cover much about taxation in the state. I was kind of hoping we would, because, I look at the idea that we have a lot of corporations and companies in this state that will lay off their workforce. They'll send jobs out of the state, and our legislators support them more and more every day. I really believe that what we need is legislators in our state legislature that are going to stand up and start reevaluating taxes on these corporations and companies. If we want to help out the small businesses, as Terry Neely was saying, well, let's do it. Let's bring back some of this money from these corporations. Let's bring it back here to these companies or these small businesses. Let's make them grow. My name's Gary Downing. I'm running for the 16th Legislative District in the 2nd seat, and I do hope I will have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. Thank you, Mr. Espinosa, Neely, and Downing. And let's give the candidates a round of applause for their responses. Some really good candidates here, certainly. So we're going to take a quick break, then we'll have the 9th Legislative District next. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And if you guys are ready, I'll get started once again. Good evening. My name is Mike Gonzalez. I'm a news anchor with KVUE Television, the ABC affiliate here in town. Also a proud member of the Latino Coalition of the Tri-Cities. And on behalf of the Latino Coalition, the League of Women Voters in Benton and Franklin Counties, the City of Pasco TV, and Richland TV, welcome. We appreciate you coming. Some of you have stayed the entire process, so forgive me for this third round of this. Hopefully I don't muff it too much, right? Should be used to reading a teleprompter. Doesn't always work, though. Anyway. All right. I'd like to note that the Latino Coalition and League of Women Voters do not support or oppose any of these candidates. We are nonpartisan in this process. In presenting candidate forums, it's our objective to provide an opportunity for you, the voter, to become really familiar with all the folks that are running for office, because we really want you to be informed. Tonight, we're going to be hearing now from the 9th District, Position 1. We've already heard from the 16th District, both 1 and Position 2. So we've had some great candidates. And again, we have a great lineup of candidates here, too. It's just such a tough choice. So that's why we're so glad to give you this opportunity. The format that we'll be using, so our candidates are educated. Each candidate may make a 2-minute opening statement. We're then going to move on to a question and answer period with a 1.5 time limit. All candidates are going to answer the same exact questions, alternating who goes first. We have prepared questions, but we're also taking written questions from the audience. So if you have a question that you really want to get out there, make sure you give it to one of our volunteers. They'll get it up to me, and as I said, if you can make it as legible as possible, that really helps me out so we can be clear. I think in the first one, it was a little scratchy, but we deciphered it eventually. But upon the conclusion of the question-answer period, we're going to have a final statement that each candidate is going to give. Candidates, take a close look. I want to point out our timer to you up in the front. She's going to hold up a sign. When you have 15 seconds left to speak, you'll see the stop sign. You do not need to stop mid-sentence, but wrap it up as quickly as you can. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates running for state representative. And I had the card with the misses, and I don't know what I did with it. I'm going to be really honest with you. See, I could be a politician, right? So I'll just call you by your name. They're Mary Dye, Jennifer Goulet, and Haley Romer. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your time coming out here. All right, let's get our opening statements. First, Ms. Dye, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters of Pasco, and also to Felix Vargas and his Latino Coalition in Pasco. You know, I grew up listening to Ronald Reagan on the radio in the kitchen. I was in high school, and he wasn't president yet. He was the first president that I ever had the opportunity to vote for, and he's also the man who best articulated what I believe to be true about human nature and our relationship to government. Ronald Reagan once remarked, "As long as we remember our first principles and believe in ourselves, the future will always be ours." I grew up believing in principles, and principles guided my leadership in Olympia this year. We examined over 2,000 bills last summer during the 3 special sessions, and 2,000 bills roughly during the regular session this winter. Most bills that I evaluated would create more government. Bills that were incredibly detailed. They made assumptions about people's lives and how policy would shape their choices. And frankly, I questioned this approach to lawmaking. I submitted 4 bills and 3 provisos. Each bill created more local control, a principle that I believe in. Government closest to the people serves the people best. Money is power, and power needs to be dispersed, not centralized. And we have empowered too many of our state agencies and we have delegated too much of our legislative authority. So as we move through this forum, I hope to give specific policy pieces that illustrate these principles, policies that I drafted and submitted in the last session, and policies that I'm working on for this next session. And thank you so much for taking the time to be engaged and involved in the civic process. And I look forward to discussing the issues with you in more detail as we move through the process tonight. Thank you.
Mrs. Dye, thank you. Ms. Goulet.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here so late. I am Jennifer Goulet. My time is limited, so I'm not going to go into my biographical information. I would encourage you to pick up one of my flyers on the back table or go to jen4wa.com for that information. I'd like to get into the issues. For years, our legislature has failed to fund public education, and next year they will have to find a way to allocate as much as $12 billion per biennium in the budget to fully fund K-12 education. And meanwhile, Washington is the second most generous state in the nation to corporations, giving away over $13 billion a year in the form of 22,000 subsidies. More than 2,000 businesses take advantage of at least $550 million in tax breaks. The biggest and most powerful businesses in the state have unfairly shifted the burden of funding vital services, including education, onto small businesses and tax-paying citizens. Not all subsidies or tax breaks are bad, but they should be subject to accountability standards to ensure that only those that add value to the lives of the people of Washington state are continued. In 2013, the legislature passed a bill that requires sunset dates and clear performance measures for all new tax breaks. I would sponsor a bill that would apply the same requirements to all existing tax breaks. The legislature is also responsible for defining what constitutes basic public education. We need to get rid of expensive, valueless, mandatory testing that does nothing but line the pockets of the testing companies. And not every student has to obtain a 4-year degree to be considered successful. We have an overabundance of STEM-educated graduates and a shortage of skilled craft persons looming. So I believe that we need to have increased access to training for the full range of 21st century jobs in high school and community colleges. And finally, I don't think there's a magic number for what a minimum wage should be, but that everyone should be able to earn a living wage, and that should be tied to the cost of living in the person's community. A living wage benefits everyone. More money in the pockets of workers is more money to spend on goods and services, which means more business, more jobs, and a stronger economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goulet. Ms. Romer.
Thank you all for being here tonight. First, I'd like to say hi, my name is Haley Romer, and I am running for Representative Position 1, representing District 9. I would like to emphasize that I want to represent District 9. That means I'm going to advocate for agriculture. It is the largest industry in our area, and that is largely due in part because my family has been farming for over 100 years, and it's something very dear to me, especially since my time served in FFA as well as on an international agriculture board. Additionally, I want to be able to support our highways and our infrastructure. Having attended WSU and trying to drive Highway 26 under various circumstances, I fully understand that it needs more support from our legislators in Olympia, more than just the current legislation that's set to go through in 2024 to be able to redesign and expand on that highway. It needs to happen sooner. And finally, and almost most importantly, I want to represent education. My mother is an educator, as well as several other members of my family, and it's not only important in District 9, but also throughout the state. And the McCleary decision that came down several years ago still needs to be dealt with, and it is of vital importance that we have legislators who can not only understand those issues, but adequately sort through and work with across the aisle to be able to put forth a bipartisan effort to ensure that solutions are creative. We need sensible solutions that make it so our legislature can actually uphold our constitutional need to be able to fully fund our education. And so if you want to support me, that means you're supporting those issues, because that's not only what I care about, but that's what District 9 needs. So I would love to have your support and to discuss these issues with you tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Romer, thanks so much. Thank you for those opening statements. We're going to move on to the questions now. Mrs. Dye, you will be the first to answer this one. The first topic is education, which has really been on the minds of people across the state. As you know, in 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that lawmakers weren't meeting their constitutional responsibility to fully fund basic education, giving the legislature until the 2017-2018 school year to fix this problem. The court ultimately found the legislature in contempt in 2014 before sanctioning them last year. And according to the state attorney general, since that time, lawmakers have spent more than $2 billion to address this issue raised in the lawsuit, but it has now been estimated that the legislature legislature needs to add about $3.5 billion to the state's 2-year budget to comply with the court's order, including ending dependence on local tax levies to pay the state's responsibility for basic education. So the question is really this: do you have any specific ideas to make sure that K through 12 education is fully funded?
Thank you for that question. So, you know, McCleary has been in question going back as far as 1977 on how to equally provide funding for education across the state and still maintain the rubric of a property tax. You know, parents really care about their kids, and so local communities that have the resources are going to want to invest more in their schools to be sure that their kids have the best advantage that they can possibly provide. And so the way we're approaching this question is a problem. But we continue to go around and try to answer the problem with the same solution, which doesn't seem to work well with human nature. The problem that we had is that the state legislature did appropriate an additional $4.9 billion into the budget for McCleary. It was $2,000 per child, bringing that cost per child up to nearly $12,000. The question I have is, you know, when WSU's tuition is somewhere in the neighborhood of in-state $12,000, you know, what is the outcome? If you were a parent and you were going to buy education for your children, would you be happy with what you were receiving in your local schools? And if we can meet that obligation, I think McCleary will resolve itself. And so it's quality, not cost.
Thank you very much. Ms. Goulet.
Well, obviously, that's kind of one of my big issues is education and how we're going to fund it. And so I've already said that I think that we need to look at the corporate tax breaks and subsidies and figure out which ones are actually good for the people of our state. Also, I think we could look at increasing a capital gains tax. One thing that I know it's not very important in this state and that I do think that we can probably get by without doing is increasing an income tax. Or creating an income tax. And I don't think we need to do that, but we do need to make sure that businesses are paying their fair share so that we have the revenues that we need to meet our education goals. I do think that we really need to stop wasting money for these testing programs and that they don't have any value for our students. They stress everybody out. I know it really stressed my kids out, to say the least. And that is wasted money. That's it.
All right, thank you. Ms. Romer.
Yes, thank you. So first and foremost, it's been a problem that education hasn't been addressed to the degree that it needs to be by our legislature thus far. Right now, as we all know, it's unconstitutionally underfunding education. And as many people on the stage tonight have brought up, what does basic education mean? And so creating a clearer definition is one good way to start. Additionally, we've talked about levy swap systems. I know out in District 9 we have more sparsely populated areas. Having attended school in District 9, I understand that we have smaller class sizes and lower property values. And so that makes it very difficult for us to be able to raise the necessary funds in order to properly fund our schools in any way, shape, or form. And so some issues that have been proposed or solutions to this would be maybe a levy swap system in order to redistribute some of the current tax funds that are already available so that we can equally fund our students' educations. And then also looking at critically, what are we currently funding? There's some administrative costs we could cut, and I might actually agree with Ms. Goulet over here that some standardized testing, we could take a critical look at the value that it gives to our children. And so I think there are many things that our legislature needs to continue to entertain, and I would do that as your legislator.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to question number 2. Ms. Goulet will be the first to answer this one. This one comes from our audience. Mental health has been a big issue across the state. We've seen that our jails are really becoming our first resource for crisis response, which is becoming a huge issue. Benton and Franklin County for a long time wasn't getting along. They seem to be coming to some sort of agreement in terms of dealing with mental health. So here's the question. How would you help solve the issue of beds and budgets within Western State Hospital?
Well, let me just say that both of my daughters have needed mental health care practitioners. I have a daughter who struggles with depression and another one who's high-functioning autistic. And when I moved here to the Tri-Cities, I was just, and I'm actually from here, but when I moved back, I was horrified to find out that to get my daughter into a psychiatrist here, they said, oh, there's only 2 in the Tri-Cities, and it's going to take at least 8 or 9 months, and the other one probably isn't taking new patients anymore. And that was in 2008. And it hasn't gotten any better. When my younger daughter recently started having depression issues, same thing. It's going to be 8 or 9 months, only 2 in the entire Tri-Cities even see minors. So it took actually almost a year to get her into one. In the meanwhile, it was rapidly declining. She ended up missing almost a full month at the end of the school year. She is doing wonderfully now. I finally got her the help that she needed. But I asked her doctor, she's a licensed mental health practitioner, and I said, what's going on? Why is this a problem? What do we need to do to get doctors here? And she said, this is a nationwide problem. They can't get doctors here because there aren't enough, and the communities are competing with each other to get doctors here. So I really think that we could really use another medical school in our state. I think that we could find ways to incentivize people to go into the mental health field, which for various reasons I don't have time to get into, she said is a problem, and also to eliminate some of the hoops that people like her, the licensed mental health practitioners, remove some of those hoops so that they can actually help fill that gap.
Thank you. Ms. Romer.
Well, first, when addressing this issue, we have to address some of the outlying issues that we face when working with this. And that's first and foremost, we need to support our law enforcement officers who are our first responders and be able to provide them with the legislative support that they need. And that typically means funding to ensure that they have the proper training and access to that training that they need in order to deal with these issues in the first place. Going further, my mother is a healthcare professional, and she works in elementary schools identifying issues in youths ranging from 5 to 11, and it's really hard to identify mental health issues that early, but still she lacks a lot of the support, and that's part of our K-12 funding initiative. We need to be able to fund our schools properly so they can get to these issues early. And then dealing with the current mental health issues, we do need more individuals in the community. I was very excited to hear about the legislature's approval of the WSU Medical School. That's one great initiative, but it will need continued support to make sure that it's an effective one and that we can create the individuals that we need and educate them properly so that they can go on and execute this. Finally, it's mostly an issue that we need constant consideration, and ultimately, we need to support our law enforcement officers so they know how to react in these situations so that they don't escalate. So, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Dye.
Thank you very much. I've served on the Human Services Board in our local community, and I've worked with families of critically ill people with mental illness and the difficulties that they face within our current mental health system of getting care to their loved ones. I think it's a definitional problem. The problem is that to identify or to diagnose someone with mental illness, they have to be in imminent danger to themselves or others. But I can't look across this room of people and tell me what you're thinking and how you will act on that. It's an impossible standard. It's a standard that prevents people from getting care. Mental illness is a brain disease. The behaviors of mental illness is fairly predictive. Whenever you have a mental illness and a portion of your brain is not functioning correctly, you will behave in certain predictable ways. But we're not treating the brain as an organ. We're treating the brain as a behavior. And so we are failing at the root of the problem to seek the medical care that people with significant and serious brain illnesses need. And until we face as a society this reality, we will continue to fail, and it will be a civil rights issue of people with serious illnesses that will not receive treatment. It cannot be a secondary system. It must be a medical system that deals with the brain issues like we deal with any other organ of the body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to question number 3. Ms. Romer, you'll be the first one to answer. This involves immigration, certainly a hot-button issue across the Tri-Cities and the region that you'll represent. We're highly dependent on agriculture. We're highly dependent on immigrant labor. Given that the U.S. Supreme Court of the United States is deadlocked on President Obama's DACA and DAPA programs, what would your plan be dealing with unauthorized immigrants, in particular labor, because you with your farming background are probably a little bit familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm going to repeat many of the people on stage. It is a federal issue, and there needs to be drastic reform on the federal level to be able to not only work with those individuals who are here to create some sort of plan so that they don't have to live in fear of being deported, but also so that they can work around being here illegally and breaking the law initially. But first and foremost, we need to also work with the children that are affected by the decisions their parents might have made to try to usually give them a better future. And so I know WSU has a massive initiative going through to help serve underprivileged populations and people, children of migrant workers, and to be able to provide them access to an education so that they can grow up to become committed members of our society. And so although it is a federal issue dealing with immigration, I think we can help support those younger individuals that are here undocumented, individuals that are already here, and be able to support them in becoming potentially citizens of the U.S., because I'm sure you would ask any of these young individuals that they would love to be a member of our society. So.
All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Dye.
Thank you. Immigration is a situation where we have a need to fix the door. When people are waiting in line for years to come through the system legally, it forces the system to create a new avenue, a black market, so to speak. And INS is a very broken bureaucracy, and it's very politicized. I had the opportunity to travel back to DC and work on immigration issues with the Washington State Farm Bureau. We were successful in working on the H-2A system, which is the agricultural labor visa, and we harmonized the IRS code with the H-2A visa so that it would remove 85 pages of regulation on the labor that the H-2A visa would allow workers to do. This is a huge assistance to farmers in our region, which hire H-2A workers. But on the other hand, we can't get those workers across the border legally in a timely fashion when the crops need harvested or work needs to be done. And when they do come, it's so arduous to transfer back and forth across the border. The time frames for the visa are unrealistic for the need of the work, that the system is not working for either the worker or the employer. So basically, we need to fix the door, and we need to make the politics of the bureaucracy go away so that we can have a facilitated immigration system.
Thank you. Ms. Goulet.
Immigration is something that I wish I could say I had the power to do, and obviously, other than trying to apply pressure from below to new Congress persons going in the future and sitting ones, to apply pressure and say, we want you guys to fix this is a mess. I think that immigrants, however they come here, if they have the tools, they can become immensely successful people, and that they are buying things and paying taxes and keeping our economy going, and we don't want to lose that. I'm just thinking of a friend of mine who's a teacher who was telling me that in the elementary school, the things that are going on the news, for example, that she's got little Latino children who cry because they're scared. They don't know if they're going to lose their parents, if they're going to go home from school one day and everybody's going to be gone. They're terrified. So what I would do is just ask all of you, be very careful who you vote for. This is high stakes right now. We've got people suffering, and there's no reason for that. There is so much divisiveness. It's an us versus them mentality, and I think that we need to just get people in there who support immigration reform and are compassionate and know that these are good working people who are good for our community.
Thank you very much. Moving on to question number 4, Mrs. Dye, you'll be the first to answer this one. It's really been in the news lately. Certainly in the last few years, we've seen a number of deaths of citizens at the hands of police officers, many of these incidents being caught on camera in our digital age. Yet in the state of Washington, it's very difficult to prosecute an officer given the circumstances related to our justifiable homicide statute. Initiative 873, it aims to amend existing state law because it says that, and it believes that this particular law is the most regressive justifiable homicide statute in the entire country. What are your thoughts on this particular law and the current climate of mistrust that's going on across the nation and in some senses here across our region between police and community members?
You know, I think it's symptomatic of a larger issue within our society. And, you know, we are a society of laws. We're not ruled by people. We're ruled by a body of law that makes an even floor for everyone to work from. So the police officers are a component of community. And as a community, we come around the police officers to support them in their efforts to keep our cities safe. I went to Detroit, and I observed Detroit like one would rubberneck on an accident on the freeway. Detroit depopulated by about 1 million people, leaving about 600,000 people remaining in the city. It has 85,000 vacant homes. The downtown Detroit is virtually empty of people, except for that Google maven purchased 94 acres and has now reestablished the downtown area. What depopulated Detroit was 3,000 gang members, part of a drug cartel, that were extraordinarily violent and made it impossible to live safely in that city. Until we deal with the crime using the law and have the law be a blind justice system as it was designed, we will continue to suffer with the kinds of distrust between the police and its community. The community must, 1 million people should have been able to tell Detroit, no more crime. We must stand up as a community in these issues.
Oh, thank you very much. Mrs. Goulet, you're next.
All right. I have a little bit different approach on that, you know, the whole dealing with crime thing. I think, now, first of all, I think we're really fortunate that though we have had some issues here, we're not having nearly as bad issues as we've seen in other parts of the country, and I'm very glad for that. But in a lot of parts of the country, and to some extent here, police are no longer able to fulfill the role that most of them joined the police force to do, which is to protect and serve their community members. Too often, cities are trying to have enough revenue to make ends meet and even to pay their own police, and they use the police as revenue generators, basically. Instead of protect and serve, it's frisk and fine. And there is a tremendous amount of mistrust of the people in their community when they feel like the police is just going to try to give them a ticket for jaywalking, you know. So we need to stop having police fulfill that role, which is not what police are supposed to do, and rebuild the trust in the communities. Also, I do think it's really important that we try to have a diverse police force that reflects the type of people in the community that they do serve. And yeah, I think that we are going about the crime thing wrong. Yes, it's an issue, but if we can deal with some of the issues that underlie crime, poverty and joblessness and things like that, and stop, you know, and there we go. I'm going to stop on stop. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Romer.
I think we're very lucky in District 9 that it hasn't been as expansive of a problem as it has been in other parts of our nation that we've been seeing. However, I do think it does come down to training. If we can't support our police officers and ensure that they know how to react in situations and also support them to establish community relationships so that they might not be so inclined to maybe act violently or neither side feels as threatened by the other, then we can come to a better solution that doesn't so often end in fatalities. And so above all, supporting our law enforcement, because they do put their lives on the line for us and protecting us. And we're very lucky. I know we have an excellent working relationship between the WSU students and the Pullman Police Department, and it would be excellent to see that kind of community building expanded throughout District 9 and even throughout our nation, and ensuring that our police officers are supported in the roles that they're meant to carry out and be able to have the training to effectively work as not enforcers, but community members. And so that we all feel equally protected and equally safe in our interactions with law enforcement.
Thank you. And for the sake of time, my directors are telling me that we're going to have to cut the answers to 1 minute now just to fit it into the television time that we're allotted. So I know that could be a difficult task, but do the best you can. But no, it's not because you're being too long-winded. We got to fit it into the television thing. So, but we're going to ask 2 more questions, but we're going to have to hurry up the process. With that being said, Ms. Goulet, you'll be first on question number 5. Gay rights issue. Obviously, it's at the forefront of everybody's mind in the United States, really across the world. Transgender bathroom laws have flooded the legislators and the legislature, for that matter, this past year. Do you believe individuals deserve to be in any bathroom that they would like in the state of Washington?
They just have to pee. I mean, come on, they can pee next to me. I don't get what the big deal is, and I'm really upset that people are making such a big deal of it. I think it's a backlash. People are angry that they lost the gay marriage battle, and this is just the next thing, and this too will pass, and in the meanwhile, you can pee next to me.
That's a good short answer. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Romer.
I can understand your position, Ms. Goulet, and I would privately share it, but I've spoken to some citizens in District 9, specifically some voters, and we believe we vote, and they are uncomfortable by the issue. And so I think on the issue of transgender bathrooms, it's something that our legislature doesn't need to deal with, but it's our society that needs to be able to kind of grow and move forward to be able to kind of accept these this new generation of people that are identifying differently than historically our population has. So I think it's more of a society issue that needs to grow, and the legislature, it's so difficult to enforce either way. I kind of fall in the middle of the road on the issue.
Thank you. And Mrs. Dye.
Fundamentally, it goes back to the rule of law. We have an unelected, appointed by the governor board that made a rule that has now the force of law, and it has no accountability to the legislative body and therefore no accountability to the will of the people. And it's not so much this rule in particular, but the idea that an appointed commission could effect a legislative action that will sustain itself through a court system that will not look at the constitutional impact that would have. So maybe it might be on this issue where a particular group feels that they needed some concern within the law, but this isn't a lawmaking body, and it shouldn't hold that force of law. And that's where I come down on this issue. It's a degradation of the authority of the legislative body and the separation of powers.
Thank you. We're going to move on to question number 6. Ms. Romer, you'll be first. This comes from our audience. And agriculture is one of our main businesses in the state of Washington. Global weather change has been causing prolonged drought, less than 50% of snowcap on the mountains, and bringing new types of pests in our region. I don't see a question in here, but I'm going to surmise that perhaps what is your position on climate change, and do you believe in climate change?
Yes. Yes. I think it's very difficult to come down on any other side than yes. There's scientific evidence that without a doubt proves that climate change is an issue. Some studies show that Washington might actually benefit from some of it, so we might be lucky in that respect. But overall, it is an issue. What is questionable is the direct cause. Is this something that the Earth is just naturally going through, like the Ice Age and then the resurgence, or is it more of a man-made issue? And that's what I think we need to support and be able to explore, because yes, we can all agree that there is irrefutably an issue, but what needs more work and more research is how to actually come to some sort of conclusion on it and to be able to start battling this issue.
All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Dye.
If you align tree ring data with the prosperity of mankind, you will find that during times of global warming, mankind becomes much more prosperous. During times of global cooling, it becomes times of great drought, great famine. And so, you know, it's just how you describe the problem, right? But global warming is an opportunity to set up a new system of taxing something like taxing air, and you know, and to regulate industry, and it's an excuse, I suppose, and it's not based on reality of the long term. So, you know, in terms of how it impacts agriculture in this region, it will have a tremendous negative impact.
And Ms. Goulet.
I don't think that the science is out at all on whether climate change is anthropogenic. It absolutely is, and pretty much nobody who has any business saying anything about it would argue otherwise. So I do think it is something that we definitely need to deal with, and I have also heard, though, that it could be beneficial to us here, and that there are people growing grapes who are already looking at, like, oh, you know, what other varieties of grape can I, you know, grow to benefit from this? So we do need to deal with it. I want to just get out there, though, that you know, I'm voting or running as a Democrat, and I will just point out that I am not your Seattle-style Democrat. I'm not one who's going to say, you know, oh, we've got to get rid of nuclear and it's all about wind and solar. I do want to see us leave fossil fuels in the ground more and get away from those, but I think that we need a sensible mix of our natural resources, our wind and our hydro and our solar, but also that we need to use the system we have now that is much better for the environment, which is nuclear.
Thank you all for your answers on those questions. We're now going to get to closing statements. Mrs. Dye, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much. These are the philosophies that will inform my leadership. Government cannot create wealth or well-being. Productive people are happy people. And production and wealth building are good for the environment. Reducing the government share of the money supply will help private entrepreneurs and private enterprise have access to the capital they need to pursue their ambitions and their dreams. I will pursue opportunities to reduce regulation and taxes and invest in the things that will open up the possibilities for our communities and our businesses to thrive and grow in our region. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this forum today.
Thank you, Mrs. Dye. Ms. Goulet.
So I am running for office because I think that Washington, Eastern Washington, is ready for a progressive leader in the legislature. And I believe that they're especially ready for and in need of one that's accountable to the people. And so if I get elected, my top priorities are going to be to implement policies that benefit the people of our state for the many and not the few. I believe, I agree that Happy people are productive people, and that people want that, but right now we have a rigged system. We have too much power in the hands of the corporations, and we need to restore the balance so that people can be productive and happy. I believe that we have a moral obligation to take care of each other, but also that it's economically responsible to do so as well. So I think that we can work together on these tough issues, both Republicans and Democrats and everyone in between. And I want to ask for your vote to keep this state progressive and moving forward. So please vote for me, Jennifer Goulet.
Thank you, Ms. Goulet. Ms. Romer.
So thank you all for coming tonight. The one thing I'd like to hit home with all of you is that this is a representative position, and what I want to do is to represent District 9 to the fullest extent of my ability. And what that means is, even though I'm running as a Republican, it's not just the Republicans I'm asking support from. It's, if elected, I would represent everyone in District 9. On that back table, I left my business cards with my personal phone number, because if I'm your legislator, you should be able to get a hold of me. If there's something you don't agree with, you can call me directly. That is my responsibility to you. If there's something you agree with, excellent, and we can do more on it. I want to hear from you, because as your representative, that's my responsibility. I'm focusing on agriculture, education, and infrastructure because those are needs I've identified in District 9, but it's not only about that. It's about what you as an individual care about. So vote for Romer if you want someone who's going to fight for your individual needs.
I want to thank all the candidates, and if you give them a nice round of applause for all their answers. And that's going to conclude this candidates forum. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank all the candidates who were just wonderful. We've got a lot of tough choices, so certainly hope you got educated. I want to thank the city of Pasco, the city of Richland, and everyone who made this happen. So again, you'll be able to see it on the multiple social media platforms. I'm Mike Gonzalez. I'll make one more shameless plug. 5 and 6:30 every night, and 11 on the ABC affiliate. All right, thanks for having me.